Okay guys, so I've already have my file and my save as open on my desktop, and you can see the file name and the format. So let's drop down and look at our formats. There are so many formats available. I'm only going to discuss Photoshop, JPEG, PNG, and your TIFF. Now, when you're working on your composite, you may have hundreds and hundreds of layers. I always recommend saving a master file for your PSD. If you look right here in my file name, it says Arctic Fox Butterfly Chase PSD. This is the name of the animal that I was using, and the Butterfly Chase is the series that it belongs to. This is just my personal preference of what I felt like naming this at the time, because it does not have a final name yet. It's just the animal plus the series. It has capital letters PSD. This is how I identify this file as my master file. If it is not the final master file, I may just save it as Butterfly Chase Arctic Fox Composite, or as I'm working on it, if I need to save it or if I need to quit and come back to it later because I get busy. But my master files always have that PSD in capital letters on the end. I used to write master file, but then I found that unnecessary as long as I just wrote final or PSD on it. So that is how I save that, and I do that because I may need to go back to it. In addition to needing to go back to it in the future, if you feel like you need to change anything, or even if your editing has improved, you can go back to that instead of starting over from scratch and just work on the layers as you go along and improve that. You may also have to work with art directors in the future if that is your end goal. If you're only wanting to work on client photos and things like that, then you may not be interested in working with magazines or commercial work. If you are going to do commercial work, let's say it is a magazine cover or even maybe calendar layout, you may need to move and adjust things within your artwork. Now, that might bother you. It bothers me sometimes if I need to change the entire layout of a composite, but magazine covers typically have to have their titles and the edges open for text so they can tell the readers what is within the magazine. So you might just have to make small changes, and that's really up to you and the art director what needs to be done and if you agree on that. Okay, so let's go ahead and continue on and not talk too much about magazines. We also have our JPEG format. Now, your JPEG format is it compresses your image. It is not the best way to save your files, but for me personally, I know exactly what my end use is for. I know if it's for a client, there's no need for them to have the largest file size available. I will knock on wood and say that I have never in 10 years had a client need a billboard image. If you are working for a commercial client, however, I would not recommend saving in JPEG. I would recommend saving in either PNG or a TIFF format, and I will tell you why in just a second. But when you are saving as a JPEG, let's go ahead and look at your layer palette. See how we have a lot of layers there? You can go in, let's cancel this and look at this. You can go into layer and you will see it says merge visible or flatten image. You can do this if you would like, but it is not necessary if you're trying to just save a JPEG file. You can just go up to File, Save As, drop down and choose JPEG and hit save, and it will compress all of those layers for you into one file. This can take a little bit of time though. So let's go ahead and at this point I would change this to say final JPEG, but I'm going to leave it alone for now, and I'm going to hit save so it will pop up the new window. Okay, now with the JPEG option window open, let's go ahead and look at that. I'm going to drop down on the matte. If you have an image that has transparency on it or files that you can see all the way through to the background, what you want to do is you want to select either a color by canceling and creating a new layer at the very, very bottom and adding a color that will look best with that image, because if you do not, if it chooses an option for printing, it can make it look a little weird. Now, I've not personally had this happen, but I've heard other people have this happen. So just go ahead and choose a white background or black, or just choose a color that best suits the image. For this one, I obviously would want to use a white or a neutral gray and not a green or a blue, because that would show through. So, okay, anyways, we're going to choose none because there's no transparent layers. We want to choose the maximum file size available. I do this because it's for me personally, or for printing, or for my clients, and I know how it's going to print because I've saved this and I've created this document at the exact size that I need for printing. I want it at a 20 by 20, so I know it will print at a 20 by 20. All right, let's look at the format options. There's baseline standard, there's baseline optimized, and then there's progressive. With your standard, it is the most recognized browser option. If you choose this, almost every single internet browser will load this image without any issues. If you choose optimize, it basically makes the image, the data, smaller. It creates a smaller file size. I don't choose this. Now, I will choose progressive though, and I will tell you why. Your progressive, if you have ever gone on a website and an image loads slowly, and it will show a little bit at a time, or it will show maybe a blurry image and then it will come in a little more in focus, and then ultimately it will show the full resolution image. That is what this means. Progressive allows the viewer to see a lower quality as they're waiting for it to load. Now, you may be wondering, why is this important? People typically, when they click on a web page, if something is not there right away, within 3 seconds they're back off of that web page, they're done, they don't want to take any time or waste time waiting for something to load. However, if they see an image that catches their eye, they may stay around and stick around and wait for it to load. So just keep that in mind. However, if you are creating an image for your website or your galleries, create your JPEG, and then, like I've mentioned several times before, go back in and create a web-only image at a smaller resolution, and that will load a lot quicker. So let's go ahead. I'm going to cancel this out, but if I was going to save right now, I would save this at a 12 with my progression and my scan between 3 and 5. I'm going to go ahead and leave it at 5. Remember, if I'm going to save for my web quality, I would reopen this JPEG up. I'd go back into my image size, and I would change my resolution to 72. You also have the option, however, to go in and save as, and choose a web quality save. This is located save for web right here. Now, it may tell you a warning that it exceeds the experience or memory errors and will slow your performance. That's because there's like 1,000 layers here. There's not really 1,000, but there's a lot. If you don't want this warning, or you do not want it to take forever, go ahead and work from a merged file or that JPEG file, and this will go a lot quicker. So I'm going to go ahead and click no, and we're going to look at our PNG and our Tiff format. Now, our PNG file, which is right here, will basically, it is a really good file format compared to JPEG. For me, it has many positive things about it. First of all, most of your clients, if they try to right click and save, they will not know what to do with the PNG file. It will not show up on their desktop because it will show up as an invisible file unless they have their settings on their computer set to show those. Most computers will not, however. You have to be able to see that in your viewer or your Photoshop to see that PNG file. So that's one thing. Now, with your PNG file versus your JPEG. With your JPEG, if you save that JPEG, and then let's say I save another JPEG from that JPEG, and then I save a third one and a fourth one and a fifth one, this works like a photocopier. A copy of a copy of a copy degrades over time. So every single time you save that JPEG, you're going to lose data. It's going to compress your image, and it's going to compress the image how it sees fit. You do not have an option for what is decided to compress when you're saving. It just does it automatically. With your PNG file, when you save a file after a file after a file after a file of PNG file, it does not lose that information. It pretty much stays exactly the same. So those are options. If you're going to do a lot of saving over and over and over and over again with your formats and your files, save as a PNG or a TIFF. But if you know that your image is exactly the right size, if you know that you're going to sell a print from it, if it's going to go to a client who's not going to edit and change and do a lot of terrible things with it, JPEG is fine. For me personally, that is what I use. Okay, so let's talk about your TIFF formats. Okay, now with your TIFF file, it is incredibly similar to your PSD. It's keeping all the data. You have your layers unless you choose on your TIFF option to image compress to a JPEG or to discard the layers and save as a copy. There are a lot of options. So when I use a TIFF, which is not really that often because like I talked about before, I know my files, I know I want a JPEG, I know I keep my PSD master file. But if I'm going to use it, I use my image compression as none. I do not want to compress this image. I want to keep all the data. I want to leave my pixel order, my byte order, and the other options all how they are on your preferences. Now your preferences, you can change these so they always come up with your preferences. We'll talk about that later. But you want to make sure that your layer compression is the bigger file option. If you're saving so you have a bigger file, you'll want to save that way. Now TIFF files are the standard in commercial printing. So if you are a commercial photographer, if your goals are to be a commercial photographer, work with print labs, work with magazines, work with stock imaging, TIFF is actually pretty standard. And you will have a very, very large file size, and the thing is you can send this to the printer as well, just as a TIFF file. Most print labs now are all set up to receive that TIFF file. Most print labs are also accepting PSD files now. However, I tell people not to send them. It is a big file. Sometimes you don't want the print labs to have access to that. And for me personally, with my overlays and my enhancement in my stores, I want those files flattened so no one else can get them. They are for you to use in your in your studio or for your personal use, and I don't want those PSDs getting out there for other people to use. It helps protect you and it helps protect me. So that's just me personally why I don't allow PSDs to be sent out to clients or to labs or to other editors. So okay, that pretty much covers the main options for saving. There are other options such as your JPEG 2000. You don't really have to worry about this. Things like the JPEG 2000 were set up because they wanted to try to create a uniform file setting for everybody all over the world to use. However, it just didn't catch on. So the JPEG pretty much is what everybody else uses, or your PNG or your TIFF. So that's pretty much how you save. The other options are pretty specific for what you are doing, such as the PDF. If you are creating a file document that you do not want people to be able to edit, but that will open with Adobe PDF Reader, you can save with your PDF. If you're saving as a movable animated format, your BMP file will be what you want to save at. So just keep that in mind in what you're using and what your options are, and go from there. So I hope that helps, and in our next video I'm going to cover how to set your copyright before saving. So let's go ahead and do that now.